Welcome to the February 4th edition of Trips and Traps. The M&M boys are in the house. Ernie Munick, I'm Richard Migliore, and we've got a common theme today. I think it's going to underscore how important starts are.
Oh, they're everything, Megan. You've been watching this a long time. How many races on the back of a horse or otherwise do you think you've watched in your lifetime?
Well, we're talking into the hundreds of thousands at this point, no doubt. And unfortunately, because of all the concussions, I can't remember them all, but I can remember the ones we had over this past week, and I think some interesting ones. So let's kick it off on January 28th, and we're going to talk about race 5 here. And we've got the 3-horse here, Voluntario circled, and watch. He's going to stumble a bit at the break, kind of almost bellies down a little bit, loses his hind end, Ernie, and it took him completely out of position.
This is the second time now that he hasn't broken sharply. And now this becomes an issue with him even as we move forward. And Erod won with him 3 starts ago when he had a clean outside post. That's the only time this horse has won. And now he kind of drifts out with him. Is he looking for that to be outside again?
Well, to me, it looks to me like Irad made a decision to put him out in the clear. Now, this horse would have had to been 10 lengths the best to win under this trip. You've given away ground at the break already, and I don't think this was one of those habitual things. I just think he lost his footing. If he had broken slowly, I would have said yes, but I think he just slipped at the break, which some horses will tend to do. Sometimes the inner track can be a bit looser. But once he puts him out in the clear here, now you're kind of compounding the disadvantage you've already got from the poor start by being wide every step of the way.
Every step, and I agree with everything you're saying. You said 10 lengths the best. He certainly was, to me, much the best in this race. How many horses made a move like this all day? And I would not even fear a class rise next time. And
now let's compound the wide trip and the bad start with that bumping and jostling at the head of the lane, which slows horses down. And I've always believed, Ernie, that it takes air away from horses. It's like body contact. You know, they're getting hit in the belly, maybe the other horse's shoulder. So you don't know how much that's taken out of him as well. I think it's remarkable that this horse ran on to be 3rd, considering his trip.
Is there anything, as a race watcher, that we can notice from a horse who gets body blow, who gets hit like that? Can you see it, or you just need to guess in that situation?
I really think you kind of need to guess. I mean, as a rider years ago, I remember riding a really good horse for Billy Turner, Pock to Pock. And he was in against an inferior field, and he got really slammed at the start, and I could hear him grunt. And then he wound up winning, but by a neck. And the next time he came back and he won the Rose Bend Handicap, and he beat much better horses easier. And it really underscored the fact to me how much air got knocked out of him at the break. But watching from this vantage point, we don't have the benefit of hearing it and kind of feeling it underneath us. But this was an obvious trip. But I think, again, underscoring the fact how important starts are. He would have been in a different position. He wouldn't have been floated out wide. And again, I think Irad may be overconfident, thinking he's on the best horse. You have to be so much the best to win with that trip being that wide after a poor start.
And not a coincidence that the horse who won broke cleanest, broke fastest, tripped out with a weaker speed in front of him who came back in his face.
Establish his position. And good starts aren't just important in sprint races. They're important in long races as well. And we're going to turn the page to a longer race on the same day, the 9th race that day. And this, to me, also is post positions played a part in this as well. But watch the outsiders, the 12. Bustin to get home, Irad Ortiz again. He kind of bobbles at the break, hops up, now he gets bumped. And the path of least resistance is to run into that empty space.
And every time, Meg, I don't mean just this race, every time I see a horse either run to open, not even get bumped to open space, but veer to open space, I think of you talking about that. And this guy, from the very start, whether you can't have a trip like this and be successful at the highest level, for horses like this, Meg, you're giving away a lot.
We gave away a lot. And now Irad tries to do the right thing. You know, you've already been dealt a bad hand. He drops him to the rail. He's going to try to save some ground. The horse was climbing a bit from the kickback, and this is problematic because as a rider, you've got to get the horse's momentum going forward, but at the same time, you don't want to get him going forward too soon, and I kind of thought he middle moved because of that.
Yes, but just a question about when he came in that first turn before we get back to the middle move, which is maybe about 1/8 of a mile away. Meg, when you come over that sharply, what was that too sharp of over to the rail. I'm thinking of Calvin, for instance. What race was it? It was at the Preakness when he shot right inside to the rail. It was a very egregious move. Can you do it too sharply?
You know, I think you can do it too sharply, and I know the incident you're talking about with Calvin Burrell. I didn't think this was as egregious as that.
Yes.
I think he recognized that, okay, I've already at a disadvantage. I got off poorly, kind of bobbled at the break, got bumped outward. He wanted to get in to save ground, so I think he was playing the hand dealt him.
Sure.
I thought he might have made up a bit too much ground in the middle here, and you know it's easy to say from this vantage point, but think about where he started when we circled him on the backstretch to where he is now. He's only about 4 lengths off the lead now. That's a lot of ground to make up in the middle of the race when horses are still fresh.
A lot of ground to make up, and also for a horse like this at this level where they don't have that big a run, and to squander so much early on, even through no fault of it, was bumped and with that post. I think Irad was dealt in almost an impossible situation. And the 11 horse, who's another major contender in this race, ends up 5 lengths behind him. You know, so I think the 12 really.
But I think you make a great point here, though. You know, horses at a certain level only have a certain amount of run in them. You know, good horses have maybe up to 3/8. Regular horses 3/16 to a quarter of a mile. And I wonder, and this is no real criticism on Irad, he's been riding so many good horses that sometimes you lose sight of the fact that with the cheaper ones, you've got to be more conservative. They're not going to give you as an elongated run.
Definitely. And with this guy, it's a little bit tricky. Will he draw a better post next time? It's hard to feel confident again. What if he draws outside again? You know, you got to be fluid and go from situation to situation. But in this race, he ran big.
Oh, I thought he ran big. And listen, Voluntario was extremely obvious. But I would think Bustin to get home is a horse that you want to mark down.
Yes.
And if he gets an inside draw, he's a horse I certainly would play back.
I'm with you.
Well, let's turn the page now and go to January 30th, and we're going to keep an eye here on the inside horse, number 1, Maybe a Diamond. Now, this is a case of where a horse is going to break out into horses instead of running to empty space. And look how hard he breaks out, and Eric Cancel tries his best to correct him, trying not to bother the 2-horse, and the horse reacts poorly. I mean, this horse must have a light mouth, Ernie. I
would love to have seen you on this horse for a couple of reasons. One, particularly towards the end of your career, it felt to me, and you know I've talked about this with you a few times, felt as though you were helping train the horse in a subtle way, horses who were difficult to ride. I still don't have a handle, Mig, and this is my second point, about whether this horse can be a stalker or a raider or if he just needs to be a free runner on the lead type. I think he showed in this race with the way he ran that he is very capable from off the pace. You do think so, even though he's pulling inside like this? Yeah, because you know what? I think what happened was when he had to be straightened so harshly, sometimes that sets a horse off. And now you're going to see he kind of makes up a lot of ground into this. He's not reacting negatively to the kickback, but he runs up on horses, and he must have somewhat of a light mouth because you're going to see the way he kind of reacts. His head comes up, shifts around a bit. The fact that he ran on at all tells me this horse can be effective from off the pace. He just needs a little bit of kit glove handling. Well, I'm curious to see how they approach the next one, because like Voluntario, now Maybe a Diamond has broken slowly twice, and his win didn't break well. Rushed up, sustained, ran fast. His 2 fast starts now with blinkers. I don't know if the blinkers have anything to do with his funkiness. Might or might not. But he's run fast twice now, Mig. This is a pretty good horse who's getting better for a crafty barn. Yeah, I like this horse a lot, and I think he tipped his hand more about his ability in this race than the race he won. Sometimes you learn more about a horse in defeat or having to overcome adversity. The fact that he ran on after the trip he had, having to be straightened up the way he did off the break, and kind of almost got straightened away and rallied again for second. Now, I know some people say, well, the winner came from behind him, but the winner didn't make up all that ground in the middle of the race and continue on. I think Maybe a Diamond is a diamond in the rough, and maybe stakes races in his future. Well, I was just going to say about the winner. There's no doubt that was like a stakes quality performance. Sure. I'm like, oh, well, he's gone now. Yep. You know, he's off on his own. Let's see, this horse has more room for improvement now, you know, and this is 2 races back-to-back where he's run at a 90-buyer level. Well, and his start before when he went wire to wire, it was a day that was very kind to inside speed, and you could almost make the point going into this race, well, he rode the bias, he had that conveyor belt, but I think he showed that it was no fluke. No, and I was against him for that reason in this race. He surprised me in this race to do what he did.
Yeah, this is another horse we're going to keep an eye on going forward. Well, we're just going to go one race ahead, another two-turn event, and this was the Wither Stakes, and we're going to look at Adventus, a horse that was making a big jump up from a maiden win, going 6 in his first start, to 2 turns against Stakes Caliber horses, and he gets off a little bit funky and kind of brushes the horse to his inside. Not exactly the start you're looking for.
No, and I'm curious, Mig, what do you think, as a race watcher, when you see horses run with their head a little bit high? Is it just a quirk the way the AP Indies run with their head low, the Chief's Crown running with the head low, this guy a little with his head high? Is the bearing out on the first turn, is it an experience, or it's just the horse, his gait, and who he is?
Well, I think he's a little bit of an up-and-down horse, a horse that's going to be a little bit high-headed. I don't blame him for how high his head gets here. As we watch him, he's getting to run off a bit into the first turn. Now, Kendrick Carmouche, again, he got off poorly, kind of put his mind in the game. Now he gets to going forward. Now his head's up in the air because he's trying to find a place to tuck in. And now this horse almost doesn't see the first turn coming with his inexperience. He basically is taken off guard. And now Kendrick's got to fight him around that turn. It's keeping the bit up in his mouth, keeping his head held high. I think it was more a function of Kendrick having to fight with him just to negotiate that first turn.
If he had drawn, but if he had drawn inside it, if he had broken well, and if there was so little serious pace here, that he might have been see ya.
Well, if he breaks cleanly, he's probably making the pace because the pace did not show up in this race. It looked like there was an abundance of early speed. How is King Kranz not in the lead coming out of sprints where he showed high speed? This was just one of those races where you scratch your head and go, wow, how could you anticipate the race being run this way? And now Adventus gets off poorly, rushes into position, has to fight around the first turn to negotiate the turn, and's wide every step of the way, and he never lets go.
What does it say to you that this was his second race?
Well, think about the winner, Sonny Ridge, who this was his 7th start. So he's got foundation. He's got all that. The fact that this horse ran well at all, let's put the trip aside for a second, Adventus. You're jumping from a 6-furlong maiden race to a graded stake. So essentially you're skipping an A other than, a 2 other than, a 3 other than, a listed stake. You're jumping about 4 or 5 conditions, a different distance, and now he gets into a bumping match with the favorite who basically was up against it with the way the pace was. That's Visibility. The only thing that lacked visibility was the pace in this race.
I love, though, the last 100 yards because, to use your word, adversity, or think of it as this, experiencing hardship for the first time. Besides the start, there was contact through the lane.
Yes.
He, after that trip, given what you talked about, his inexperience, was able to out-finish the favorite flexibility through that last 100 yards to hold his position. And
then actually was running on again the last 70 yards, like where he's almost looks like he was running with the emergency brake on a little bit, got hooked up. I'm sorry, with flexibility. I said visibility. My brain's a little cloudy. I think this is a serious horse, Adventus. Now, the problem is he broke his maiden going 6. Now he jumps into the Withers. I'd hate to see them pursue a route to the Derby. I think this is a very good horse, but you're cramming a lot in a very short period of time. I'd rather see this horse point for, I'll say it out loud, I like him as my Belmont horse. I like him as my Travers horse going forward. But I think if you pursue the Derby dream where they're going to go 1.25 miles, too fast a pace for the race, and try to cram for that exam, he's going to take the worst of it.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate if we have a moment.
Sure.
Gotham, the logical next step.
Sure.
While Mohaymen has been very impressive, he hasn't been on paper, speed-wise, that fast. He beats a horse who was spectacular in a sloppy track, now on a fast track. He beat Flexibility, who obviously are a very good horse. Yep. We saw what happened here. So if Mohaymen isn't as great as everyone says, and this division is on the open side, can someone not emerge, maybe, in this next 2 months, or still it's just not enough time?
Obviously somebody can emerge, and there's no hard and fast rules when it comes to this, particularly in this day and age where horses don't race as often. I think Adventus is a very good horse, but I think trying to make a horse get to the Derby is different than a horse making you take them to the Derby.
Understand.
And I think this is a serious horse, and I think he's got big wins in his future. I also will say I think Mohaymen is head and shoulders above the East Coast horses, and visually he was extremely impressive the way he accelerated in the Holy Bull. It's going to be interesting. Mark my words, though. Adventus stays healthy. He's going to be a horse that has at least one major victory on his radar.
Well, I don't feel guilty about talking about a horse who was an obvious trip because we, and I don't say this that often, we were on this horse going into the race.
Oh, love the horse.
10-1 was an outrageous price. We're both on the horse, so I think we had a right to talk.
And if he breaks cleanly, maybe he's in the winner's circle. Well, that's going to do it for us this week with Trips and Traps. We want your help. Don't forget, Trips and Traps at NYRAInc.com.